In this video, I'll show you how you can use the plate reverb effect in Superior Drummer 3 along with the Decades expansion library and manipulate that reverb with focus on pre-delay to get a unique and useful sounding drum mix. Now we're going to start by going into the Schmitt mix preset menu, and we'll go down to this Rock and Fusion pre-delay. That is going to load the Pearl kit with the Ludwig Black Beauty snare. You can hear that reverb already on that snare drum, and if we look at the mixer, that is because we have a plate reverb send on this snare top, and that's getting sent to this plate reverb bus channel where we have plate reverb effect with the settings you see here. Now what we're going to do is add this to the kick drum, so we have plate reverb sends on both the kick and snare drum, and then we will manipulate this plate reverb in a variety of ways, primarily keeping an exaggerated pre-delay so you can really hear what those effects do to the mix. So the first thing I want to do is turn up the send. We're going to exaggerate the send so that we can bring down the plate reverb, adjust to taste, exaggerating once again so you can really hear what this effect is doing. So we'll turn up the send for the snare. And then we're going to copy, Alt, Option, click and drag over to the kick drum. So we have that same exaggerated level and we have it on the kick drum as well. So now here's where things get interesting. We could use the default settings that we have here within this Schmitt preset. But what I want to bring to your attention is how much leverage for sound design adjustments you have within this reverb effect alone. We're going to leave the pre-delay where it is. And by the way, pre-delay simply means when this delay effect is happening. 96 milliseconds means there's a 96 millisecond delay before you actually hear the effect. So let me pin the snare drum velocity pad, Control Option Alt to bring this up. If I turn the pre-delay all the way off, that effect is going to happen immediately. And it kind of blends in with the transient of that snare drum. If I really exaggerate, let's just go all the way to 500 milliseconds, you'll hear a delay from the initial transient or sound of the snare drum and the delay effect. So that gives you an idea of what pre-delay is. Obviously, that's very exaggerated and may not be what you're looking for. So I can bring the time down. In fact, I could even sync this with a specific rhythmic value, which may be useful. But for now, let's bring this back close to where it was, about 100 milliseconds. So you can really hear that reverb effect. In a sense, it exaggerates the reverb because if you adjust the pre-delay to the point where you hear the initial attack of the instrument, the sustain of the instrument starts to decay, then the reverb comes back in. It's almost like it exaggerates the sound of that instrument and that reverb. So what we can do is go through a variety of these settings and see what they do. Obviously, Reverb Time is going to adjust the length of the reverb itself. I can go very short or very long. Now 20 seconds, obviously exaggerated, but I want to bring your attention. You can go very long if you want to. I'm going to hit X to stop the sound. Very nice shortcut to stop the sound there. Let's go back to even just a few seconds. So you can get some very, very big reverb sounds, and if we use even more pre-delay, we can exaggerate it even more. So it almost sounds like you're in this big, massive room. You're hitting the drum and you get this delayed effect because the room's so big, but then that sound bounces back and you get that big reverberation. So that's Reverb Time. Let's bring that back down to about where it was. And now with this pre-delay and a short reverb, it's almost like we have a gated reverb effect because it's not so long. We don't have that long extension. With a shorter reverb effect and reverb time and pre-delay, it almost sounds gated. So you have that almost 80s sounding reverb, very similar to the 1981 classic reverb, but we're doing this with a plate reverb. By the way, that would sound great on toms. Let's see what that does. I'm going to copy our sends to the toms, Alt Option, click and drag. Since it's very simple to do, we might as well. So that's an option as well. Select my snare drum once again. And now let's go down to some of these reverb settings: size, shape, diffusion, and color. And depending on the reverb effect you're using, these will change. But I want to encourage you to really try different setting options. Exaggerate, try some things and see what you come up with. There are a lot of creative options here at your disposal. So the size, if I turn all the way down, we get a very shortened effect, as opposed to if I turn it all the way up. Notice it's not such a gated sound or a short sound. Even a short reverb time, it extends it a bit, and you can use the two together. So turn the size up and reverb time up, get a really big sound, or size all the way down, and you still have that reverb time, but it's just a bit of a different sound. Let's turn the size up a little bit and we'll adjust shape. So if we turn shape all the way up, or all the way down, imagine adjusting the reflections and shape of the room. So this is essentially what this is doing. And this is going to work in tangent with the diffusion and color. I love these two settings because you can adjust the reflection sound and also a bit of the EQ. So color is going to affect the high-end frequencies that you hear with this reverb effect. Right now it's turned close to all the way up, and you hear a lot of the high frequencies. As opposed to if we turn it all the way down, it's a bit more filtered, and the shape will affect that as well. A bit more subdued with the shape turned all the way off as opposed to all the way on. And then diffusion, we turn all the way off. It's almost like we get these really exaggerated and quick reflections. Take a listen to this. That to me almost sounds like you're in a racquetball court, a really small, tight space, and the sound is just bouncing all over the place. So if we adjust the color, bring in some of that high end again. Almost like it with the color turned all the way off, and we can adjust the size. Now we're losing some of those reflections, or if we go all the way up, we can extend them, and we can turn up the reverb time. And let's bring the color back up so we can actually hear that reverb. So this color and that high end, you'll really hear that with the reverb time. Hear all that high end sizzle. So keep in mind this color and reverb time are great to adjust together as well. So we get a little bit of that reverb. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. We have the pre-delay, which I'll exaggerate again. And then we have this exaggerated diffusion where it sounds like the sound is bouncing all over the place. Again, that's a very different sound than what we had to begin with. Let's take a listen to this in context with the groove, and I'll make some additional adjustments as well. So there I was just making some adjustments, trying a few different things. And as you get to know what each of these dials do, you can really come up with some interesting reverb effects to take your mix to another creative level. Now, if I add another effect here, for example, the hall reverb, I have very similar settings. So you can take the principles and apply them to another reverb effect. Now, some of them are a bit different. If I add the room reverb, we have reverb time, decay, diffusion, damping. We do have pre-delay. So the settings are a little bit different. But again, use that creative approach to try several different configurations to see what you can come up with. Now, one last thing to mention on this pre-delay, I mentioned we can sync this with a specific rhythm. So let's come up with a very short, almost gated reverb sound. We'll reset all of these. Turn the size all the way down. Bring the diffusion and color down, and let's extend this pre-delay. So you have a little bit of that slap back, but let's say I want that to fit with my groove, with my tempo, and I want it to be a specific rhythm. So let's set the rhythm to eighth notes. And so now we can have a tempo matched reverb pre-delay that will be in sync with your tempo based on the rhythm you choose. So you can hear that decay. Let's go to a different groove. We'll do eighth notes again. This is a different tempo, and instead of a swung groove, it's just a straight ahead type of groove. So you can hear the rhythm. The tempo doesn't matter. It's going to sync with whatever tempo you have in your song track based on the rhythmic rate you select. Let's do 16th notes. And so that's close enough to the actual note. You don't quite hear that pre-delay. So again, a slower rhythm is where you'd really hear that difference. And then we could bring down the wet mix, so we bring in a little bit of that dry signal, so we hear a little bit more of that original signal. So just a few different ways to get creative with the pre-delay effect. So that gives you some knowledge of what that is, how it affects the reverb sound, and how you can use that pre-delay sound along with your mix and the other parameter adjustments within the plate reverb or any reverb effect within the Superior Drummer 3 mixer and the Decades expansion library.